Hi. So this recording is a replacement of me being able to share with you and stream live. So we'll see whether this ends up being used or not, but just in case, I'm recording this so you get a little bit from my perspective on how Algorithmic Artscape came together, and particularly how my background in dance and interest in dance and choreography sort of shaped that. And I'm actually going to refer mostly to references that I've been returning to whenever I get to do work. So I hope you'll find it interesting yourselves. So this is my presentation for Algorithmic Artscape, a platform for exploring distributed community creativity. I'm gonna share my inspiration and influences on my work and how that also passed on to this particular project. I'll focus on choreography, language, and code. I'll start with a work by Alison Knowles called The House of Dust from 1968. This is a digital poem composed of 4 separate categories prepared by Knowles. And this was then fed into a program called Fortran by Tenney, which was then processed by a mainframe computer at Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute. So this was a time in which computers were not available to people. There were no such a thing as a laptop, and most people who had access to computers, these computers were, for example, in universities or schools, and and it was, especially for artists, was definitely not usual to get access to computers at the time. And I have here an example of one of these poems that, and you can see essentially how there's a logic to it that then was fed into the computer. So there's always a first sentence that starts with a house of, a second sentence that either has by or in or on or among, sort of adds to this house in some way or form. And then it uses something, and that it's inhabited by something else. So I'm going to just read an example. A house of paper by an abandoned lake, using all available lighting, inhabited by friends. So here you can see that then all the other paragraphs sort of follow the same structure, and this was the poem structure that was created by Alison Knowles. And on the image on the left side, you can see that there's indeed one of these poems that the computer generated, and then on the right side there's an image of the papers falling from the sky, and this was part of an activation of the work, a performance, we might say. And I find this element also quite important, that not only there was indeed a collaboration between artists and a computer and a programmatic sort of process, but there was also this performative element. And while today it might not be very reasonable to think that there's a plane flying on top of people to spread these artworks, is probably not the most friendly for nature and the carbon footprint these days. We would probably rethink how to do that. But at the time, it also meant something, the spreading of these poems and making it accessible to people that way. And her work also, in her work, you also see this idea of activation, this idea of language being more than a poem. It also opens up your imagination. The works that she then developed are also close and part of even this movement called fluxes, in which text and language was very important, but it was not the text and language itself that matter. It was very much the concept and the idea and what it activated in terms of thoughts or actions when the audience would encounter that work and those poems. So I'm sort of interested in that, in how language can take us to think and do things in a different way. Another work And you can see that on the right side, the image in black and white, where you have these dancers in the background and then like some people working with devices of different types on the foreground. And that's part of Open Score 9 Evenings, Theatre and Engineering, a work that even preceded the earlier one from 1966. And this was the first large-scale collaboration between artists and engineers and scientists, at least the first one known in the West. So this was in the US. The two groups worked together for 10 months to develop technical equipment and systems that were used as an integral part of the artists' performances. This work for me has a little bit of a different meaning. It's very much in this collaboration. While in the first one there was indeed like a collaboration between people with access to a computer and like sort of this technical apparatus and the artist, this one I think took it even further in the sense that this happened across so many months, and it really sort of shaped the way the performances were then happened. So this is what I'm showing now, a sort of visualization, data visualization of the 9 evenings, and it has the name of the performers, it has some of the equipment and some of the material that fed into the performance, and it sort of tries to map sort of all these things together, which I find it quite incredible. So this was a Clarice Bacdio put together these online, so it's actually available for anyone who's curious. I'm gonna click on Yvonne Rainer because I'm a fan of her work, and you can see that there's many different types of documentation here, from photos, which I suppose we're more familiar with, but then also a diagram that maps other aspects of the performance and how there were pre-programmed events that were important for the relationship between the dancers' movements, and apparently they also needed to communicate using walkie-talkies. So there was like a whole orchestration with that, and then also light changes, projection of films, and etc., etc. So all of that has been documented, and I find it quite interesting to navigate that. And here's another one where you see the more technical bits. There's even some motors running to make some of these changes happen, and yeah, it's I find it a very nice project to navigate and to essentially revisit how these performances came to be. So I'll move on, since this is available online and you'll be able to explore further if you'd like. And I'll now mention two other works as seen in the images. The image on the left, where you have a group of people in a circle shape, and that is from Teatro do Oprimido, a project by Augusto Boal that sort of initiated in 1970s and got very prominent in the 80s. And it used improvisation, acting techniques, sort of games or instruction-like exercises to invite people to do things with their bodies and in relation to one another. And also an important part of it is this idea of non-actor. You don't have to be an actor in order to perform and in order to participate in these events. So I'll show you some other snippets of the work of Boal. So here you can see some different exercises. So essentially, Boal would be thinking of ways for people to come together in unusual ways, such as what you can see in the picture, where there's people hugging each other and crossing their legs, and having to sort of articulate the movement of how they would then walk together. And there's a lot of these exercises. Some of them are quite playful, and oftentimes these would lead to sort of more serious conversations and actual, at times even like full theater pieces that would discuss societal problems, and to the extent in which, you know, the people would come together, argue about their and discuss issues that they were confronted with in their day-to-day lives. And there were times even in which, through the engagement in the teatro do oprimido, some injustices that people, you know, faced, some of these were even taken to court, and it helped winning some of these cases. So the fact that you use theater as a way to invite people to for a conversation, essentially, but doing that through other means that you would not necessarily do in your daily life. So on one hand, it does connect with daily life. On the other hand, it provides you a different platform, literally like a stage for you to rethink daily life. So I find it a very powerful work, and it's definitely influencing a lot what I do myself. And the next one is Vocable Code by Winnie Sun. It's both a work of art, so software as artwork, not software to make an artwork, and a code work, where the source code and critical writing operate together. So just a quick thing that I forgot to mention, I've jumped a few decades now, so we're in 2019, and this work is by a dear friend and colleague, and I'm also very inspired about Winnie's work. This work is particularly dear to me because it also I participated in it, so I donated my voice. And so just to wrap up with the introduction of this work, it was produced to embody queer code, examining the notion of queerness in computer coding through the interplay of different human and non-human voices. So if I play for just a second, you'll get a sense of how it works.
Not only gay.
Fixing the binary.
Queer, and that means queer.
Intricacies of gray.
A false dilemma to me.
About being you.
Blowing in the wind.
A false dilemma to me.
Not fix, not null. Whatever they need to be.
The next generation.
So yeah, this work is available online, so you can actually get to read the whole code while experiencing also the execution of the code on the other side of the screen. So it's a very special arrangement as well. And just to wrap up quickly, going back to choreography, there's sort of digital archive repository of scores and notations in contemporary dance and performance practice that I also visit a lot in my practice. So it's called What's the Score? And it has works from different dancers and choreographers. And again, here you can see like these drawings trying to make sense of movement and movement practices. Language is also a big part in some of these people's practices. And I take a lot of inspiration from also seeing how other people write about movement and think about movement in their practices. So again, this is online, and you can also look into it. And last but not least, another artist that I very much look up to is Kate Chicau. I chose a work from 2016, but she has a lot of work being done since a while ago, and actually very prominent in the live coding scene. I met Kate, was one of the first live coders I met, and I was very happy to get to know her work. Very happy to find another dancer in the room, and whose work very much feeds into also how I understand choreography and how I feel like the connection between choreography and code can be made. So I'm just going to read a little bit about the work. Hacking choreography explores both the overlap of programming and coding languages and choreography, as well as principles of computer hacking such as repurposing or subverting, drawing on similarities such as defining terms and executing commands. Choreography becomes a code run by dancers, but also code for movement may be considered choreography. And so it opens a lot of questions around what language can do essentially and how it can communicate between computers and humans. And in the image on the left side, you see a dancer on stage, and behind her there's a projection that says dancer B equals swing, move 3, dancer A equals static, dancer B equals wave, move 4, dancer A throw, dancer B equals twist. So you get the idea of how there's this connection between code and language and movement happening here as well. So I invite you to check out her portfolio too. And the last work that I'm gonna mention is actually by myself, and I thought, yeah, of course it also makes sense to mention a little bit about the work that I've done in the past. And I'm gonna show you these geometries.xyz, a website that documents a work that I've done with Rennick Bell back in 2020. And as part of these, I put together a collection of scores, dance scores mostly, but there's also some music scores. And a lot of it was sort of literally going around the idea of how circling, circles, and other geometries sort of help or have invited people to think in very particular ways when it comes to art production, but even about thinking about more generally, what does it mean to, as a being, to encounter these geometries. So it's a rather philosophical take, but I indeed, it very much sort of explains the kind of research that I've been doing in the past and the attention that I give to the work of people, mostly dancers and movement practitioners, and in how they essentially write about movement and movement practices. So again, language and choreography are very present. So I'm not going to go specifically into any of these work, but I invite you to do that, as this is also available online, this website. And last but not least, I actually thought it made sense to end with both, I guess, telling you where to find more about my work and the algorithmic artscapes. So speaking of language, and language as an invitation to think about movement and to engage with movement and imagination, one of my thinking around these and how to translate that into algorithmic artscape was through these scores that you can trigger by clicking on the button on the left side of the interface that says new score. And then every time you do that, there's a new sentence and set of words that sort of invite you to perhaps respond to these if you would like, while you're using other parts of the interface to produce music or to produce visuals. So it's sort of like an invitation, an extra layer of meaning and ideas that are thrown into the mix of tools that the interface offers. And another aspect of these that Celeste suggests, so why don't we also have more words around that could be generated and that could invite people to sort of add to these word maps. So I'm gonna add movement as a word. So there's these extra words that can be also added in the moment. So you see I generated words that relate to movement, and I generated 10 of them. So obviously this is connected to another algorithm, so it's hard. I'm not 100% sure how the mapping of these words come together. But it is this element of surprise as well, the fact that these words will sort of bring something new to the experience as well. And yeah, and I hope these triggers thoughts for yourself, for your processes, and for engaging with the interface. Very curious to know what comes up. And at last, if you want to know more about my work, it's online. I'm also going to mention that particularly my performance and live coding work is documented in Joana.art, where you can see as much as possible. I've tried to document all the different projects and collaborations, and Algorithmic Artscape being the most recent one. So I'm very excited for that. And then others that are either work in progress or ongoing work. I oftentimes revisit even like work that I've done many years ago. So yeah, do take a look if you're curious, and that's it. I hope you enjoy the presentation.